All of the gathered princeps were present at the next session of the council, except for Basanius, who had other matters to attend. They sat in a long row in one of the lowest tiers with Vetheril, by special arrangement of Fabricator General Kane. They watched in silence, as still as if they were standing at attention, while the council circled laboriously towards the consideration of their fate. Rantal condemned the battle on the Stellarum Vigil.
While the attempt on Ambassador Vetheril's life was a despicable and cowardly act, it is apparent that the exiles from Mars have brought their internal conflict with them, inside the walls of the Imperial Palace itself. This is beyond unacceptable.
Our internal conflict?
Wasn't that your civil war being fought last night?
If you truly think the war is only Martian, then your ignorance is the true danger to Terra.
There were murmurs and snickers from the assembled delegates. Even Simeon Pentasian smiled wryly as Rantal sank back into his chair.
This is a distraction. What must be decided is the disposition of the Collegia Titanica forces.
And who will decide that? The Honorable High Lords of Terra? By what right and under what authority? Under the provisions of the Treaty of Olympus, the Titan legions have never acted under orders from this council, but voluntarily acceded to its many requests. If the Council of Terra will not give Mars the right to decide its own destiny, how long do you think Terra can stand against the War Master without the Mechanicum's assistance? And how long will you be allowed to behave as if you command the mighty Titans yourselves?
Your implied threats do your cause no good. Furthermore, they ignore the realities of our situation. Mars has no voice here, because Mars belongs to the traitors!
There was uproar in the tiers of the chamber. Tevera and Vetheril exchanged a weary glance. Pentasian rose from his seat.
Once more, we are losing ourselves in recriminations and insults, rather than acting for the good of the Imperium. There is one point upon which I will agree with Ambassador Vetheril. The current situation regarding the chain of command is not tenable.
Rantal was startled.
Surely you don't seek to endorse the creation of their new Adeptus?
Absolutely not. Given that Mars is currently lost to us, I believe we must all accept the fact that the treaty signed between Terra and the Mechanicum cannot be held valid. All of its provisions are nullified. We must act to formalize a new accord and a central authority. Yes, the Collegia Titanica needs a clear chain of command. And that chain should begin here, in the Council of Terra.
No! You cannot dictate that!
Vetheril had had enough. She had made one last effort to reason with the council, but it was pointless. Pentasian and Rantal were lining up to pick over the carcass of the Mechanicum before it was even dead, and the other High Lords were following their lead. She looked to Tevera again and nodded. It was time. Rantal sat up straighter, relishing the meal he imagined was to come.
Ambassador Vetheril, as representative of the Mechanicum adepts present on Terra, you will...
The doors to the chamber flew open. His treads grinding against the polished marble floor, Zagreus Kane entered the political arena. His arms were folded, their mechanical hands held open. He had come without weapons, as was the law, yet his very being was the embodiment of machinic force. His existence was a threat, and Vetheril saw with even greater clarity why he had chosen not to be part of the deliberations until now. His mere presence precipitated crisis. The Collegia Titanica representatives stood as one. Vetheril watched the jolt of realization hit the chamber, the High Lords at the debating table in particular. They were suddenly aware there was a concerted military force in the midst of their council session, unarmed, but still intimidating. At the head of the table, Malcador the Sigillite clambered painfully to his feet and planted his staff squarely on the floor. He called out to Cain as his clanking form reached the dais.
Think very carefully about your next actions, Zagreus.
I am taking none.
The Fabricator General did not mount the platform. He remained where he was, observer and observed. Tevera turned in her exoskeletal frame to address the tiers above them.
I am Warmonger Princeps Tevera of the Legio Aggraveades. We have come to be heard. So hear our voices now, and take heed. If the formation of the Adeptus Mechanicus is not approved in this session, then the Collegia Titanica will know where it stands, and we will no longer be the puppets of the Council of Terror. To your eternal shame, you have abandoned sacred Mars, home world of my Legio. Now, you demand that my comrades forsake their worlds too, to burn undefended beneath the assaults of the traitors. If there is no Adeptus for Mars, there will be no Titans for the throne world. We will abandon the solar war and return to our own fiefdoms immediately.
The chamber erupted in roars of outrage and condemnation. Council members and observers alike shouted over each other. The noise washed over Vethril. She and Cain and the Princeps stood in silence, unmoving rocks in the sea of anger. You have heard us now, Vethril thought, but will you listen? She guessed not. Har-Antal leapt to his feet. He did not seem so comfortable in confronting the imposing form of the Fabricator General at the edge of the dais, and so he pointed an accusing finger at Vethril instead.
This is who you are! This is treachery! A coup! I will see you executed for this!
This is no coup. It is the resolution of an equation. We understand the necessity of an Adeptus Mechanicus. If you do not, then you must be shown it in terms you can comprehend. The binary succession must be ended.
Oh, I'm tired of this.
Rantal turned to his fellow High Lords.
Let me call in the arbitrators. I will have the Martians arrested and tried for their crimes against the throne.
The uproar grew louder. Most of the voices cried their approval, but others urged caution, leniency, time to consider all options. They were the ones who saw the line that was about to be crossed. The loyal leader of the Cult Mechanicum and many senior princeps of the Collegia Titanica, in chains, would be a disaster for Imperial morale across the galaxy. At last, Vethril knew some of them were beginning to see the danger, but not enough. And now it was too late. A deep, reverberating impact shook the floor of the chamber, swaying the long lumen sconces hanging from the dome high above. Vethril and the Titan officers noted it well, but did not react. Another impact, stronger this time, strong enough to be felt in the shudder of the walls. The council delegates in the upper tiers began to glance around at one another in confusion, even as a further tremor shook masonry dust from the ceiling. Then, Mars's greatest voice was heard on Terra. The blast of the war horn cut through the din of the chamber, and all who heard it fell silent. The sound came from far away, but it rattled the dome all the same. The bellow was deep yet piercing, redolent of the greatest majesty of war. Another tremor followed it a few moments later. They were drawing nearer. Pentasian's eyes grew wide.
What is happening, Ambassador?
The Imperator Magnificum Incendius of the Legio Ignatum walks towards us.
Vethral's words were a simple statement of fact. Their implication, though, was enormous. Rantel stared at her in horror. The war horn sounded again, louder, nearer, and a moment of shocked quiet descended over the chamber. Thousands were holding their breath at once, listening to the approach of the God Machine. One of the most colossal engines of war ever built walked with ominous purpose towards the political heart of the Imperium. It had stepped over the defenses wrought to protect the master of mankind as if they were not there, and now strode down the wide avenues of the outer palace, driving crowds of fleeing citizens before it. Its huge weapon arms cycled up, rotary barrels the length of maglev trains, plasma accelerators that could drive a starship. The Titan's roar was so loud, it seemed as though that alone could bring the palace tumbling down. Emplacement guns were brought awkwardly to bear, having only been intended to fire outwards from the walls. The Custodian Guard and Imperial Auxilia garrisons tried to outflank it, but this was just one single engine of the Collegia Titanica, and there was currently nothing within 100 kilometers that could halt its relentless advance. Panic took hold of the council chamber. There were no windows, no one could see what was coming, yet the sound was enough. Everyone present knew of the holocaust that an Imperator Titan could unleash upon its foes. Its voice was a howl to shatter the heavens. The end was coming. There was no escape and no recourse. Pentasian scrambled towards Vethral.
Stop this! You are commanded to stop!
Vethral stood her ground.
Who commands us?
She timed her words to come between the blasts of the war horn. The beat of the Titan's steps were the rhythm of approaching doom.
Who commands the Mechanicum? Who commands the Titans? The binary succession is the product both of poor Martian logic and frightful Terran ignorance. And it may prove the doom of us all.
Vethral looked at Malkador. The Sigillite was watching her steadily. His face was shadowed, expressionless. He said nothing. He was letting the situation play itself out. Was he so confident there were lines that the Mechanicum and the Collegia Titanica would not cross, Vethral wondered? Or had they already been left far behind? The ambassador and the princeps had committed themselves irrevocably. The consequences of this day would be unavoidable. She felt the Sigillite judging her, waiting to see if, once and for all, she was prepared for what she had set in motion. Or maybe you approve, Vethral thought. Maybe you want this too. The blast of the horn overwhelmed the screams in the chamber. People were scrambling over each other to reach the exits from the tiers, fleeing what could not be escaped. But the sound froze them in mid-flight. It was so close it seemed to come from inside the dome, and all around them, all at once. In the moment of silence that followed, Vethral spoke again.
The binary succession must be resolved. The Adeptus Mechanicus is the resolution. There can only be 0 or 1. There cannot be both. Otherwise, there is uncertainty. With uncertainty, can there ever truly be loyalty?
She paused.
And if there is no loyalty...
The Titan's battle cry came one last time. One more step, and it seemed as though Magnificum Incendius would crush the dome beneath its immense armored foot. Rantel threw up his hands.
Enough!
He stumbled back to the table and sank down into his chair.
Enough!
The other High Lords, some of them part way towards the chamber exits, nodded their agreement, looking shrunken and small beside the other men and women of the council. Betherel nodded to Tevera, who spoke into her vox bead.
Princeps Pisanius, stand down.
Magnificum Incendius halted. The tremors ceased. Even so, Pentasian looked up as if he could see the shadow of the Imperator pressing against the exterior walls of the chamber. His face was ashen.
We concur with Ambassador Vetherel. There will be an Adeptus Mechanicus to resolve the specific conflicts of succession within the Martian contingent on Terra.
Malcador spoke then. His tone was hard, unbowed.
And what does the Mechanicum propose in return? Tell me, Ambassador, do you expect the Council to be held hostage indefinitely? The Adeptus Mechanicus will be a voice on the Council, but it cannot be the only voice.
Agreed. This must never be allowed to happen again.
Rantal was not posturing. He had reached his limit. Betherel could hear his conviction and his determination. If she pushed him any further, his duty as commander at the arbitrators would force him to push back. Then the nightmare would truly be unleashed. Malcador nodded slowly, rapping his staff on the marble floor of the dais.
There will be conditions. If Fabricator General Zagreus Kane is now to ascend to the ranks of the High Lords, he must permit us some concessions as a gesture of good faith. But we will discuss such things only when the officers of the Titan Legions remove themselves from this chamber.
This was the price that had to be paid. Kane had to restore trust, and Vetherel's boldness